Hi, welcome back to FAIR's Defending the Book of Mormon conference. I'd like to introduce to you Morgan Deane. He is a freelance writer, military historian, and former U.S. Marine. He earned history degrees from Southern Virginia University and Norwich University and studied Chinese military history at King's College London. He has authored numerous books and articles on a variety of topics ranging from ancient history to the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. But his passion remains the Book of Mormon, and his latest manuscript explores the interactions between the Book of Mormon and just war theory.
A greater portion of the Word, the Decisive Book of Mormon, in the debates on war and peace. The Latter-day Saint study of war and peace would be greatly enhanced by the study of seminal thinkers on the subject. Unfortunately, very little has been done. The common reason given for ignoring these theorists is that the Restoration Scriptures create a higher bar than what many scholars see as neither broad nor comprehensive enough just war sources, or that Latter-day Saints aren't beholden to medieval Catholic theologians who, it's implied, are too narrow, old, or small-minded to provide insights in the modern age. It is true that Mormons are blessed with the restored gospel, and modern problems seem complicated, but there have been vanishingly few examinations of Restoration Scriptures and how to solve these problems. Mormon thought and interactions of that thought with just war theorists would benefit immensely from using those thousand-year-old texts, not ignoring or minimizing them. We are commanded by the Lord to seek ye out the best books and words of wisdom. The great thinkers have wrestled with questions like the importance of the heart, the morality of preemptive war, and how biblical principles interact with the creation and nuances of international law for ages longer than Mormonism itself has existed, and that Mormon thinkers have only briefly considered in the last few decades. But in many important ways, those seminal texts and ideas benefit from the Book of Mormon engaging with them, because the Book of Mormon doesn't simply show congruency with just war beliefs. The interaction of ideas between holy texts and seminal thinkers produces important commentary and stronger insights. For added benefit, in contrast to just war theorists who had to discern their rights through often extra-biblical theorizing, these new insights derive from holy texts and thus should assume stronger importance. Many of these conversations are found in my manuscript on just warfare in the Book of Mormon. One of the most important insights is how the Book of Mormon settles the debate regarding how a soldier with a peaceful heart that desires to turn the other cheek, or renounce war, as Mormons would say, can also wield the sword. And that answer, found in Christian theorists and decisively solidified by the Book of Mormon, provides a much stronger foundation when judging matters of war and peace. The heart of a sincere believer is the origin of one's faith, but also the center of debate surrounding the use of force. The pacifist impulse stems most strongly from the Sermon on the Mount and Christ setting aside past laws to proclaim that one must turn the other cheek and be a peacemaker. Frequently, without knowing, Latter-day Saints follow the same contours of the debate between pacifism and just war, but do so with a different scripture where the Lord commands his people to renounce war and proclaim peace. The use of force is most justified by Latter-day Saints in scriptures such as Alma 48:15 and Alma 43:14. 48:15 and Alma 43:14, where the Lord commands the Nephites to defend their families even unto bloodshed. The debates among the Christian community involve the use of biblical scriptures. The example of the Good Samaritan is probably the most important, but Jesus overturning the tables at the temple and John the Baptist and Jesus' command to the soldiers are pertinent as well. Both sides often talk past each other, and there is very little interaction between them. Latter-day Saints haven't recognized the assumptions their arguments are founded upon, nor have they thought about a way to reconcile the two viewpoints. But there are basic logical assumptions and a vast body of historic Christian thought that shows how there is no contradiction between peacemakers and warring soldiers. Christian thinkers carefully examine the New Testament regarding the role of force, eventually determine the supposed contradiction is resolved by soldiers that wield the sword with a peaceful, loving heart. Jesus violently cleansed the temple in Matthew 21:12 through 13, and John 2:14 through 17. Notably, when struck, Jesus himself didn't turn the other cheek, which suggests that Jesus at least found a situation when turning the other cheek was not the right course. Many scholars contend, however, that Sermon on the Mount directs inner attitudes and not external behaviors, and certainly doesn't convey instructions to guide foreign policy. In reviewing the Church Fathers, David Corey and Darrell Charles summarized that most of the Church Fathers commented on the general nature of Christians to be peaceable, content, and conciliatory, as Justin Martyr said. And contrary to popular perception, those Christian Fathers still didn't reject soldiering. They objected to the pagan ceremonies often associated with military service. Many Christian Fathers cited Jesus and John the Baptist's words to soldiers. The Prince of Peace didn't tell a Roman soldier to put down his sword. Instead, Matthew 8 through 10 records how Jesus praised the faith of a Roman soldier. And John the Baptist didn't tell the soldier to put down his sword and follow the Prince of Peace, but to be just and stop extorting the people. When many libertarian Latter-day Saints claim that members should reject nationalism and soldiering, they reject these clear scriptures. Tertullian recorded Christians that fought as Roman soldiers. He only rejected the danger of idolatrous military ceremonies. And many Christian thinkers like Clement supported the state's right to use force, and Clement prayed for the success of the emperor's army. The summary of the two positions to be peaceful and to fight in wars after hundreds of years of early Christian thought was described as a vengeful spirit that is denounced, not force itself. This idea may have been inspired by their reading of Romans 12:19, "Dearly beloved, avenge not yourself, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord." And remember that one of the sins that made Mormon refuse to lead was the Nephites' desire to avenge themselves of the blood of their brethren who had been slain. Like the Nephites of Alma 48:21 through 23, Augustine seemed just as worried about where the souls of the dead soldiers would go as he was about warfare itself. Augustine summarized the ideas of soldiers with a loving heart wielding the sword by using the term benevolent harshness. And according to Augustine, this could sometimes be seen in God himself. The medieval monk Gratian warned that force should be used for love of justice, not for inflicting punishment. Thomas Aquinas said that war is waged for a peace, so those fighting are not opposed to peace except evil peace. It sounds like a contradiction in terms, but he used the example of a parent that punishes a child. That punishment is harsh, but it is done out of love. And Martin Luther compared the use of force by a loving soldier to a doctor that must save the patient by sawing off a limb. For a good physician, when the disease is so deep that he has to cut off and destroy hand, foot, eye, or ear in order to save the body, seems, when we consider the limb that he cuts off, a terrible, merciless man. Yet considering the body that he thus tries to save, he is in truth an excellent, faithful man and is doing a good. Francisco de Vitoria, the Salamanca school scholar, wrote that only under compulsion and reluctantly should a leader come to the necessity of war. John Locke focused on natural rights more than scripture, but comes to the same conclusions. John Locke said it was permissible to defend against aggression, but force should only be used as calm reason and conscious dictate, and not in extravagant passion. And probably the most important summary of the need for a loving use of force comes from the Good Samaritan. He was used by Jesus as an example of true Christian love for one's neighbor. But the 20th century theologian Paul Ramsey asked, what if the Good Samaritan came across the beaten traveler during the attack? It would be ridiculous to think that the Good Samaritan would turn the other cheek of the beaten traveler, renounce war and stand idly by, wait until the traveler was attacked 3 times, or question the legitimacy of action by citing long-standing ethnic tension in the region, or perhaps the culpability of the traveler. The love of the Good Samaritan for his neighbor would compel violent intervention. This is an impressive array of Christian thinkers or Enlightenment scholars, but they mostly appeal to reason and astute observations about Holy Scripture instead of Holy Scripture itself. Once their point is noticed, however, the Book of Mormon is filled with examples that show the importance of a loving heart in wielding the sword. For instance, in the discussion of Nephite warfare in their terminal period in Mormon 4:5, Mormon wrote, "It is the wicked that stir up the hearts of the children of men unto bloodshed." And verse 11 of the same scripture describes the origins of their indescribable sins. Every Nephite heart was hardened, so that they delighted in the shedding of blood continually. In multiple descriptions of Captain Moroni, not delighting in bloodshed was more important than strategy. Alma 48:14 says that the Nephites were taught never to raise the sword except it were against an enemy, except it were to preserve their lives. And Moroni did not delight in murder or bloodshed, but he delighted in the saving of his people from destruction, and for this cause he might not bring upon himself injustice. The first part of Mormon 7:4, "Know ye that ye must lay down your weapons of war," is used by some as a pacifistic command to lay down arms, but reading the whole verse suggests it was the heart wielding the sword that was more important than the sword. "And delight no more in the shedding of blood, and take them not again, save it be that God shall command you." The idealistic church set up around the waters of Mormon, in one of my favorite verses, stressed the people obtained peace because they had their hearts knit together in unity. This verse becomes even stronger as it reminds me of a Chinese poem called The Peach Blossom Spring that describes a Taoist version of heaven and suggests that a peaceful heart can create a peaceful, heavenly existence out of their environment, as exemplified by those around the waters of Mormon. Alma chapters 43 and 44 repeatedly set up a dichotomy between the Nephites and the Lamanites that centered the better goals and heartfelt attitudes of the Nephites. Alma 43:45 quotes the better cause of the Nephites as defending their homes and liberties, their wives and their children. Now they might be like Laman and Lemuel in 1 Nephi 17:21, which describes how they thought their homes are simply about enjoying their possessions. But this verse is more likely a reference to the same feelings we have for our brothers and sisters in Ukraine. We care because we have compassion for them, because so many of their homes and liberties are being trampled, and the Nephites were commanded to have compassion or love, even unto bloodshed. In contrast, we might compare the Nephites' loving attitude and better cause with the Lamanites, who are recorded as rejoicing over the blood of the Nephites and inflicting barbarous cruelty. In Alma 43:7 and 8, the Lamanites are inspired by hatred and anger. And verse 45 of the same chapter adds that the Lamanites were fighting for monarchy and power. The difference is summarized and highlighted in two key verses. In Alma 48:21 through 23, the Nephites were compelled reluctantly to fight the Lamanites and were sorry to take up arms, both of which describe the primacy of the heart. And after the personal ministry of Jesus, when there was no contention in the land, because the love of God which did dwell in the hearts of the people. In summary, the seminal texts from brilliant Christians show Mormons where to look in their own text. And the Book of Mormon responds with strong and repeated indications that it was the peaceful heart of the soldier that mattered more than the tragic necessity to wield the sword. When talking about the apostasy, it is commonly asserted that those without the light of the restored gospel often did their best to explain principles. We can see in this case that seminal Christian thinkers did very well, but without the weight of scriptures, their words could be equivocated away and often ignored. In fact, that often happens when discussing even the clearest restoration scriptures as well. But the conversation between leading thinkers throughout history and the Book of Mormon enhances and solidifies the understanding of the most important part of War and Peace for those that are interested in learning. There is no contradiction between turning the other cheek or renouncing war and wielding the sword. The loving Christian heart knows when they are compelled to wield the sword, as Psalms 82:4 said, to deliver the poor and the needy, or as Alma 84:24 through 25 said, to prevent the barbarous cruelty of their enemies being inflicted on their loved ones. There are many more things that Latter-day Saints can learn from the interaction between Christian just war theory and restoration texts. In many other cases, the restoration texts are in discussion with those thinkers that produce additional and needed insights. It is our duty to find and understand them. Thank you.